Welcome, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Daniela. I'm the Director of Marketing at mStoner. We're a full-service digital-first agency, builds elegant, creative, and effective solutions to your greatest digital challenges. I saw a note real quick before we get started that somebody's sound is glitchy. So I'm just going to ask everybody, if I'm coming through loud and clear, can you use the raise your hand feature and let me know you can hear me? Oh, wonderful. Thank you, everybody. Yes. Oh, good. Okay. Keep me posted as we continue if that changes. And hello to our friends out there. I see some Union College, Albion College, Wheaton, Central Michigan University. Welcome, everyone. It's nice to have you here. Before we dive in, I'm just going to explain what we're going to do today. Our format, I'm actually really excited about it. Some of you may know that mStoner partnered with the National Institute for the Study of Transfer Students this year to create what we're calling a comprehensive transfer website strategy guide. The guide details best practices, tools for creating and maintaining a transfer-friendly site. And we released that guide in October. I know a lot of you joined us at that first webinar. Since then, we've gathered some feedback and we've asked for your questions, and we're going to try to address as many as we can within the next hour. So that said, you may still have questions and you can absolutely ask them during the webinar. The Zoom control panel has the Q&A feature if you'd like to send the question directly to me. We've also opened up the Zoom chat room. Just make sure that you have your settings marked to all attendees and presenters. And our team member from mStoner, Nicole Lentini, is moderating that chat. So if you're having any issues or want to share ideas, feel free to interact with her and all the other attendees during the presentation. We also have a hashtag, and our colleague Travis is monitoring Twitter. So if you have any questions, please use the hashtag mStoner, NISTS. I also saw a question in the chat about recording the webinar. Yes, we are recording, and we will send it out probably by the end of the week. You'll have early access just because you showed up today. So keep your eye out for that email. And then the last housekeeping item, you can help us help you by filling out the post-webinar survey. It takes about 2 minutes, and we do read your comments and ratings. They help influence topics for future, and we will be sure to chat the link at the end of the webinar, and we'll also send you an email. So I think everybody has heard enough from me today. Don't forget to use that hashtag, but I am excited to introduce our presenters. First up, I believe, is our friend Emily.
And hey everyone, good afternoon or morning, wherever you are. My name is Emily Kittrell and I'm an assistant director at NISTS. I've been here for about 3 years, and before that I worked at a small, primarily transfer sending institution. It was technically a university, but functioned a lot like a community college. I was in charge of orientation and registration, so lots of experience with class registration in my background. And people love the holidays for the weather and the presents, but I say bring on that good old holiday appetizer, the delicious baked brie. I want all the cheese.
I too love cheese. Cheese is one of my main food groups, yes. Next up, we've got Laura.
Hey there, everyone. My name is Laura Birdsall, and I'm mStoner's account manager. My background before coming to mStoner is in admissions and student affairs. And in my spare time, you can find me in the kitchen baking, also kind of pretending that I'm on the Great British Bake Off.
I hope you win. We can pair that baked brie with the bread and we've got ourselves dinner. Yes.
Hi there, everyone. I'm Voltaire. I am one of the founders of mStoner. I'm also the CEO and the head of client experience. Spent the first 10 years of my career actually as a development officer for local colleges and universities, raising money and raising friends. And a little known fact, I built my career on digital communications, but as far as I'm concerned, there's nothing as great as the feel of fountain pen ink on paper.
I agree. And don't let Voltaire fool you. He's actually a really great cook too. So he's got recipes, in his back pocket. Janet.
Melissa Clark, New York Times. She's a goddess.
I love it. I love our theme. I'm going to carry it out. I'm Janet Marling, and I'm the executive director of NISTS. and have had the pleasure of being in higher education all of my professional life at various institutional types and in different roles. One in particular was the Vice President for Student Affairs and Enrollment Management at the University of North Georgia. I'm super excited because it's Chex Mix season, like the homemade kind, not the kind out of a bag, not the Muddy Buddies, but like the pure stuff. And the fact that now we have Chrissy Teigen and John Legend peddling this stuff, it just doesn't get any better than this. But the cutoff is January 1st. Like it's Thanksgiving to January, and that's it, because it is way, way too pound inducing. So anyway, it's Chex Mix season, and I couldn't be more excited to be here with y'all.
I have to disagree. It's always Chex Mix season, Janet. It's
It
always.
is, but my waist does not like that at all. So I have no self-control. Zero, nada, none. Like, can I just tell you that I have Chex Mix right here? Right
That
here,
is
people.
awesome.
So yeah, now you know a little too much about me. So I'm turning it back over to Danielle.
That's amazing. We'll travel with food. Love it. Oh, well, thank you all. I realize it's probably lunchtime for a lot of folks too. So hopefully that didn't, get anybody too hungry before we dive in. The topics we're going to cover today, we've got some information about community colleges, four-year colleges, serving multiple user groups, and maximizing content. And then we're going to wrap it up with some quick wins that you all can do, some takeaways that you can leave with and that you can apply at your institution. But before we do all of that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and turn it over to Emily, who's going to talk.
Actually, you can keep it because I have a couple of slides, so you can keep it for just a second.
Oh, wonderful. All right, then I'm going to go ahead and do that.
Okay, so everyone, first of all, Anne, I don't know if I know you, but I need to know what a mayonnaise cake is. I'm from the South, but I'm not familiar. I'm Googling it later, so thank you for the hot tip in the chat there. One of the questions we received a lot of had to do with applicability to two-year colleges or the community college context. So, we've talked about this before if you were in the previous webinar, but unabashedly, our guide is geared towards primarily transfer receiving institutions. And so of course we know that that's whoever has a big transfer in population, and that happens to be universities more often than not. So there's no question that some of the guide looks like it would be most beneficial for 4 years or universities to use. But the reality is so much of the stuff that's in the guide is just broadly applicable to any institution that wants to serve their transfer students better. So Danielle, if you want to give me a click, just to run through a couple of points. I mean, any school needs to know who their students are. So of course, that transfer defined section of the guide and the personas and the journey map, you need to understand who to put on your transfer website team. So preparing your institution, building that 360 stakeholder loop, the content strategy, figuring out what students need to read, but more importantly, how to write it in a way that is welcoming and affirming and validating to their choices. All of those things, all the way down to governance and next steps, can be applied to 4-year and 2-year institutions. But one of the things to think about is that we totally know that there is a difference between what students are looking for if they're transferring in versus if they're transferring out. So if you're at a 2-year institutions, I encourage you to flip your lens from transfer receiving to that really transfer planning mindset, because you can provide so much information to help students understand what that journey is going to look like at your institution, but also as they transition to the university stage. So one of the things we found, Danielle, if you want to give me a click, one of the things we found throughout our year-long research is that no matter what student or even advisor persona type we were working with, they all seem to have some level of concern around 5 key areas. And so community colleges, I'm here to tell you that you too can address this very information on your site. So it's things like transfer preparation. What do you need to know? What do you need to do? What do you need to be thinking about? Your academic planning, what classes to take, degree options. Am I doing that AAS? Like, will that work? Or do I need the AS? Is there a specific transfer degree I need to declare? Which classes will get me ready? And a huge one is that financial piece. How can we help students prepare financially for the transition? Because I suspect the tuition will be very different between your 2-year institution and your university, especially if you're one of our free community college states. So that's a key issue. And then of course, just navigating the transition, getting to that campus, figuring out how you're supposed to get plugged in and who you need to see for help and that kind of thing. So all of those things can begin to be addressed on the 2-year website. So Daniela, if you want to send it over to me, one of the things I'd like to do is show one of the websites that I am just currently smitten with. I don't think I know anybody at this institution in particular. I just found it. This is one of the ones that's listed in our appendix of the best in class websites. Wabansi Community College. Now, I read through their page and they are doing so many things right. We can just start to scan a little bit. But one of the things they do right off is say, you're going to start here, but you're going to finish wherever you want. We've got those pathways. And they've got people over here on the side talking about it, saying why transfer is a good experience. They've got really welcoming language, which is super important. And then beyond that, they've got a little bit of the same kind of navigation that we purport in the planning guide as well. So talking about what is right for you. And so you got some choices there. Why transfer, talking about affordability, flexibility, and keeping your current life. This is really important for transfer students in particular. They're juggling multiple responsibilities. So you can see just in the way they're laying things out on their page and they're talking about it, they are already addressing some of those top concerns that transfer students are bringing with them. Then they've got their calls to action down there, request next steps. Now, I'm going to be honest, one of the things that I think they could do a little bit better is on the literal transfer planning aspect. And it may well exist somewhere on their site here, and I just haven't found it. But I want to show you what I mean when I say transfer planning, because I don't mean like your literal degree or program maps. I don't mean I'm choosing biology, so tell me what to take in semester 1 and semester 2. I'm thinking much more broadly and big picture transfer planning. So step 1, think about what you want to study. Choose your major, talk to people. This is actually a state systems site. This is from Pennsylvania. And I think Nicole or Travis are going to share some additional state system links in the chat for you to look at. But these will give you a good idea of the types of sort of big picture, broad planning information that transfer students need. And it can absolutely begin at the 2-year institution. I chose to show you this Pennsylvania site because I really like the reflection questions they've included in the middle there. They're having students actively think about, here's what you're going to do, but how might that be unique in your situation? So things like that could be really, really helpful. And hopefully that actually showed. Did it show the right thing? Did I do it right? Okay. And now I'm going to share something else. I'm going to switch over to the booklet real quick. So these are, this is page 22 in the web guide itself. And so this is where, if you're a person working at the 2-year, you might be reading through these things thinking, oh, well, that's not me. I can't really do program filters and career outcomes for the 4-year institution. I don't know that stuff. And that may well be true. But if you read through these web opportunities, you'll see that some of those things we talked about, those 5 key areas, are all reflected right here and giving you lots of options for what to put on your website. The key being, what do I need to present that helps a student plan ahead? One of the things we know about transfer students is not everybody has access to the kind of guidance they need to get really prepared. So we've got to give them as much information as possible. So pages 22 and 23 might get your wheels turning. Another page I want to point out, though, is down here on page 37. This is, I think, if I were reading this from a 2-year, this is where you'd start to lose me, because as we get into what are called these wireframes or architectural maps, this is where it starts looking really 4-year centric. But again, I challenge you to read the words and the broad recommendations, but think, okay, so what should this look like in terms of transfer planning? One of the things I don't see enough is this maximize your college experience type of content. Now, obviously, whatever you put in each of these boxes will depend on your situation. And so those are very flexible, but you can see we're giving students that big picture look at transfer. What do you need to do when you're thinking about it? What do you do to apply? How do you be successful in your transition? And then what services and resources do you need? You can start linking to stuff at your 2-year campus, but also if you have partners at your 4-year primary partner institution, you can start linking to their pages as well. This maximize your college experience, this is an important point to me because I just don't see it enough on any transfer website, whether you're at the 2-year or the 4-year. And it's that roadmap, so the transfer planning stuff like I showed you on the Pennsylvania site, but also all of these other things transfer students need to think about getting engaged with as soon as they make the leap. You've got to help them get this stuff on their radar as early in the transfer process as possible so they can get all their ducks in a row as they make the transition. So it is those high impact practices, internships, study abroad, transfer seminars, research opportunities, bridge programs. You can lay the foundation on your 2-year site to help them think ahead of what their engagement could look like. It's all in how you think about it. This applying for transfer, obviously you're going to link to the 4-year site a lot for that, but you know those things like the mapping your transfer credits, picking your major, planning your tuition, those things are very applicable to 2-year sites as well. So you've got lots of opportunity to tailor this content to fix your to fit your particular context. So I don't know, I hope that is helpful. I am a little biased, I don't know, I worked on the project. I think it's all applicable if you really dig in and just tweak your lens just a little bit. So certainly anybody else is welcome to chime in on that if you'd like.
Thank you, Emily. Oh, I think that really helps clear it up. Sometimes it's all about reframing and thinking outside of the box. And just like you laid out in those steps on that first website, I think a lot of times people often overlook, hey, how-tos are really popular for a reason. And sometimes you need step 1, 2, 3, and 4, just like your transfer students do. So I really appreciate you wrapping that up nicely for everybody. And it seems like the chat appreciated it as well. So thank you very much. One of the things you touched on, which is actually a really nice segue, I think, into Laura's next topic here, is that there are different types of transfer students and that there are multiple pathways for it. So Laura, I am going to pull up my screen so that we can talk about the different types of user groups that we have. And stand by, everybody, while I share that, unless you want to dive right in, Laura.
Yeah, well, while you're pulling the screen up, I'll just start by saying that we got a number of different questions on this topic. In particular, how do you disseminate information to students who are coming to you across a wide variety of age ranges? So how do you talk to a 19-year-old versus a 40-year-old? How do you talk to someone who has a lot of educational experience already or is maybe just coming out of high school? So we're going to be having students coming to you from all different backgrounds, and we need to find a way to speak to each of them on the website. Oh, Daniela, you're on mute. There we go.
Can you guys see the screen now?
Yes.
Awesome. All right. Oh.
All right. So I'll dig in a little bit more on the topic of how do you address a 19-year-old versus a 40-year-old. I think that was directly one of the questions that we got. And what I find to be most important in this arena is that it's more about the stage the person is in versus their age. So, you know, the saying age is just a number really does apply here a little bit. And I'll share a personal story that I think illustrates that. My dad, for example, he took his very first ever college class when he was in his late 40s. So he had the educational experience of someone who we might think of as just getting out of high school, maybe what you would assume would be the educational experience of an 18-year-old. He was just starting that journey in his late 40s. And then when he finished his bachelor degree after going through a transfer process from a 2-year to a 4-year college, we actually were in college at the same time and ended up graduating with our bachelor's degrees during the same year when I had gone to college right after high school. So in that case, we were in the same stage of our educational journey, but very different ages at that point. So how do you know what to do with this information? For this, we've developed a number of different personas for students along with their trusted advisors. And Daniela, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen if you don't mind.
But Laura, I just successfully was able to share mine.
You're my inspiration. Hopefully I'm able to do this smoothly. Here we go. So on the site strategy document, starting on page 15, you can see the different student personas that we've developed. And these personas are here to give you an idea of what it's like to be in the shoes of these particular students. Personas are really rooted in empathy and are meant to give you an idea of what is the experience of being a transfer student. What are some of the obstacles that they might face, or where are things happening easily for them? And we broke our student personas into two main categories. And I won't go through one by one here, but I do want to orient you to the information that's available in the guide. So first, we have these staying highly directed personas. These are students who have clearly defined goals. They've probably had access to some advising and they know how to navigate a website a little bit. So they have a clear idea probably of what they want to study or what their college journey might look like. You'll see on the next page that we have a little bit more information about what their needs are, what roadblocks and pain points they have, and what are their goals and expectations of their college experience. The second set of transfer student personas that we have are entitled Overcoming Obstacles. And these are students who want to have an educational experience in college, transfer to a four-year university, but maybe their goals aren't quite as clear. They might not know exactly what they want to study, or maybe they've got some misinformation somewhere along the way and are having difficulty navigating the process. And we want to make sure that we are really reducing barriers and eliminating these roadblocks from an institutional standpoint. So again, there's some information following of how to best address these needs and how to eliminate some of those pain points and smooth them over. We also have some personas regarding advisors. Of course, it's not only students who will be using your website, though they're going to be your primary audience. You also want to make sure that this information is available for counselors, both at the high school and college level. Really, we want this information just to be as clearly laid out as possible. I'm thinking back to my own experience working in admissions. When talking to transfer students and advising them, I would often refer back to our website. Students and counselors are viewing your site as a source of truth. So not only does it need to be accurate and up to date, but it should really be clear and lay out these processes really clearly for them. So internal audiences within your university might be using it and directing students to these particular pages, as well as advisors at other institutions, whether it's a sending or receiving institution. As Emily stated earlier, that can really be any institution. So it's important just to make sure that this information is widely available.
That's awesome, Laura. Thank you. So I just want to reiterate one of the things that you said. It's not so much about the age, it's the stage and where these students are. So a lot of folks out there might be thinking, okay, well, and this is true, that maybe 19-year-olds use different language than 40-year-olds. But really what you're trying to get at when you optimize your website is, where are they in the journey? Where are they in their process? And what are the tools you can give them to help move them further and to feel good, I think, about, applying to your institution, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, you're right. Some of that lingo is probably different, but you're probably not going to be using some of those, cultural phrases online.
Yeah. So stage, not age. And then the other thing is don't overlook the importance of those advisors. I think sometimes we go all in on tech or digital, or you post it on their website and you think set it and forget it, but you do have people at resources out there, and those advisors are definitely one of those. So know who you're talking to is the moral of Laura's section today, folks.
Absolutely. And there's one more thing that I wanted to address. Another question that we saw come up was how do you address first years versus transfers or different populations of students on your website? And I'm going to pull up App State's website, who we actually talked to when we were doing some research for the site strategy guide. You can clearly lay out who you're talking to on your website with routing links. So when you go to the App State site and you go to their how to apply page, they right off the bat show you these are some different student types: first year, transfer, military, international. And there's going to be overlap between some of these processes. but it shows the student who's on the other side of the screen, okay, this institution sees me and I've been in the military, so I know that I can find information about what my needs are and how the university is going to address me. Same thing by going to their transfer page, then you can then dig down a little bit deeper about information of how to apply, and then get a little bit further into, okay, well, what are these different subsections? So you can clearly lay this out on your website. And what I would highlight in particular is that it's really important that you're not hiding this information or making it difficult for students to find. It should really be front and center in some way. You want to invite transfers to apply to your university, so make it easy for them to do so.
Can I add something? Am I allowed?
Please do.
I love that, because we did see that a lot. People are like, well, how do I point them in the right direction? And so in the guide, one of the terms that I learned were those gateways, and you set up links to send people to the right information. So set up appropriate gateways, but then also, in addition to that topic navigation where you set up links according to the specific topic, we included in the guide something called journey navigation. And I love that idea. I didn't come up with it, and I love it, because you're helping transfer students see, we acknowledge that you may be a student who took dual enrollment classes, and you might think you're a transfer student, but when they click on that link, I'm dual enrollment, and I had dual enrollment in high school. When they click on that link, it's going to send them not to the transfer page if you don't count them that way, but to their appropriate stuff. Likewise, you may have transfer students with over 60 hours. You want to send them to specific information, or transfers that you might consider transfer freshmen under 30 hours. You want to send them to specific information. So there's topic navigation, but also the journey navigation, I think, is a really helpful tool for making sure people get to the right content.
Oh, and Emily, it's like you set me up, because I know it's like we know what we're doing here when it comes to things that aren't screen sharing, because the next topic is about maximizing your content. So we got a ton of questions about the best way to label things on website, what websites are doing this well, what content needs to be on there, non-degree, what to name it, what paths to go through. And I mean, the best person, I think, to answer this is Voltaire, who has been doing this for a long time and has a lot of insights, I think, to share on this. Volt, wow us all. Tell us what you think.
Good deal. Thanks, Daniela. All right. So one of the main questions that we got around maximizing content is, show us some really good examples. So I wanted to pull up a few examples of different sorts of institutions. So let me share my screen. Hopefully you'll see Waubonsie Community College. All right, Emily landed on this earlier today, and it is really a great format. It is a great example of a community college that is providing not only clear information, because what we're doing when we're serving transfers is we're trying to provide information that is very direct, concise, and practical, right? Here are the steps that you need to follow. Here are the things that you need to consider. But there's also a layer of information that we're trying to provide that is aspirational, that communicates, you can do this, you can be successful, you are welcome here, and we are here to help you to do the best possible thing for yourself. And I think Waubonsie Community College does a really great job of hitting those notes, not only providing really concise, direct information, but also communicating the idea that this is something that is worthy of you and that you will be supported in. So let me show you a couple of other examples. An example of a public four-year institution doing transfer really well is University of Washington. We actually got the chance to interview the person who was responsible for helming this project and got some great information that we then in turn embedded into the site strategy. So University of Washington is the one example of the four that I'm showing where they have tried to centralize all of the transfer content as much as possible. And this was made possible because of the fact that from the leadership on down, there was a recognition of the importance of transfer students. So from the president on down, there was this idea of, oh, this is a very important population to the university. We need to support them. We need to coordinate everything that we're doing. We need to make sure that we are communicating consistently and concisely to them. So I think University of Washington is a great example of showing people, or walking people through the stages. So you see in the navigation before you apply, preparing, once you've been admitted, how you transition well, and then they have information for the individuals that spend the most time serving transfer students. In terms of a private four-year institution, I really like what Park has done. So Park University, if you go to their homepage, you'll find that they have, like Laura was talking about a little bit earlier, routing mechanisms. So if you go to transfer, then you'll see that they've got transfer starting with the message, we're excited as you are for your transferring, so let's get together. And how do you do this easily? So they say here there are 3 key steps: apply, submit your transcripts, and apply for financial aid. How simple is that? That is so incredibly inviting. That is so incredibly, I can do this. And then the last example that I will show you is Mills College. Now, Mills is a private 4-year liberal arts college out in California. They're a really good example of a small number of pages that do a really great job. So they don't have a huge transfer site that several different offices have come together to manage. This is a very discrete set of pages, but they cover all of the things that transfer students want to know: dates and deadlines, requirements, frequently asked questions, transfer credits and agreements, and then connecting with an admissions counselor. So if you spend a little bit of time on their page, you'll see that the information is located fairly well, fairly concisely. So those are the examples of what I would point to in terms of different types of institutions that are doing transfer content right. So a couple of other questions that we got as far as content were as along the lines of, well, what content is important to have on the site? So what I'd like to do is I'd like to point you to the transfer guide. And if you take a look at pages 31 and 32, we broke content up into 2 different types: the essential content, the content that just needs to be there, and then the feature content. If you have extra bandwidth, if you have extra resources, and you want to layer on content that is going to be helpful to your transfer students, here's where you would focus. And what we've done in the transfer guide is we've provided notes and also a recommended review and refresh rhythm, understanding that, as Daniela said earlier, it's not a set it and forget it. It's not a one and done. It really is paying attention on a regular basis to the content, making sure that it's up to date, making sure that it's accurate, and then making sure that your institution understands the sort of commitment that you need to make in order to make sure that your content for your transfer guide, for your transfer students, is always refreshed and up to date. The last thing that I want to share is wireframes. So we spent a lot of time looking at the different sorts of sites, so the different types of content, the different sorts of sites. And what we did in the wireframes is we combined all the best of what we saw people doing well. So you should see on the homepage of the wireframe that we created for a transfer site that you've got several different ways of navigating. So the first way is this audience gateway navigation, which Emily mentioned a little bit earlier. So we know that parents and families, faculty and staff, secondary school counselors, and academic advisors and college partners are 4 distinct constituencies that a transfer site should serve. So we created navigation around those constituencies. So if you clicked on parents and families, you would come to a wireframe, or you would come to a page that had all of the information that was relevant for parents and families. Same with faculty and staff. The second type of navigation is the topic-based navigation. If you were going to focus on one navigation set first, it would be this one. It would be this one because it's the navigation that most people tend to use first in wayfinding. And this riffs off of some of the work that you saw with University of Washington. So maximizing your college experience, which Emily touched on earlier, applying, how to be successful in that transition, and what support and services are available specifically for you. A third set of navigation really focuses around what we consider internally to be key conversions, or what prospective students, transfer students, need to know are the key touch points with the institution. So they include figuring out how your transfer will, or your credits will transfer, figuring how much it'll cost, actually talking to an advisor. Sometimes the best sort of connection that a site can facilitate is that high touch, high value interaction. So in those cases where talking to an advisor is going to make something really clear really quickly, we want to facilitate that connection. Requesting information, scheduling a visit, starting your application are all key conversions. And then the final is that what Emily was talking about earlier, which is your transfer journey. So we have learned through our research that some people don't necessarily think in terms of I'm part of this audience or this is what I'm looking for. They're thinking about where am I now? And so these are the 6 key scenarios that we identified through our interviews. First, I'm a high school senior and I'm planning to transfer to, start at a community college and then transfer. The second key scenario is I'm completing my associate's degree. Third scenario is I'm coming from another 4-year institution. Fourth is dual credits. Fifth is I have course credits from multiple schools, which is huge. Janet, what's the statistic of how many different institutions a student sometimes brings their transfer credits from?
Well, we know that 25% of transfer students will transfer more than one time. And, we've seen transcripts, especially in metropolitan areas, where students are bringing in up to seven different community colleges prior to landing at their 4-year institution. So it becomes extremely complex very
Oh,
quickly.
absolutely. Absolutely. So helping people to figure out how to navigate that is essential. And then the last key scenario was someone who started a while back and is now continuing their educational journey. So we created this set of navigation so that if you're thinking in terms of life stage instead of age, then you have a place to begin to explore. All right, I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to turn this over to Janet to cover the 4th group of key questions that we got.
Yes, thank you, Voltaire. Oh, good. Janet's already on the ball. Fantastic. I just want to wrap up by saying, so Volt, a lot of the questions we got were like, should I talk to the person, the persona, or should I talk to the life stage, or how do I lay that out? And I think the answer in listening to you talk was, it doesn't matter as long as it's clear and consistent and that you're answering those questions. And what's best for your institution, really, you might want to fall back on your analytics or your data to figure out what you should put back up on there and what way you should lay it out. But as long as it's meaningful and thoughtful, it seems like it's useful. And maybe I took some liberties there, but would you agree with that?
I always agree with everything you say, Daniela. It's like we're twins. We share a brain.
If only. Yeah, no. But I do think that looking at data is another tip that everybody out there could use if you're searching for where is your audience? What pages are they landing on? Take a look at your analytics and that will give you at least a starting point.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Analytics, the thing about analytics is that they help you identify that there's a problem, right? They can tell you what's working well. They can tell you here there's a problem here. And then from there, you have to figure out what the problem is. So analytics won't necessarily diagnose how to solve things, but it will point to, oh, this page isn't getting any traffic at all. And then when you are able to take analytics and interviews with actual students, that's a really powerful combination of information that gives you both the data and then the perspective of the person or the people that you're trying to serve.
Love it. Yes, thank you. Fantastic. All right. And then Janet, are you ready to share your screen? I can pull my
You know
slide.
what? Why don't you go ahead and share yours for just a second, and let's talk a little bit about the quick wins. And we know that this is a lot. The guide is 90+ pages. You may be a very accomplished web developer, and so a wireframe makes total sense to you. A journey map makes total sense to you. You may be a transfer professional who has both sets of skills, like our friend Emily, who can do websites and do transfer. transfer. And then you might be somebody who's really passionate about transfer, but that web thing is a little bit intimidating. So we want to talk through a couple of things that you can do to make that quick win happen for you. And first and foremost, if you haven't already, we want you to do your homework. And we have provided you not only with this web guide, but a supplemental tool. And if you go to the site where the website or the strategy guide lives, towards the bottom of the page, you're going to find, and I am going to go ahead and share my screen, Danielle. So whenever you're ready for that, we can do such things. Let me make sure there it is and share with you all. You guys tell me if there we go. All right, let me share this sucker. And you'll see here, just down here underneath the guide page, then you'll see this transfer web snapshot website tool. And this is where it will just really give you that opportunity to say, what is our website currently doing on behalf of our students? What is it not doing? And when you're doing that, you can either do it yourself, you can gather a team together to work with this. Most importantly, you either need to have transfer students be involved in this process, or put your transfer person hat on. You may have been a transfer once upon a time in your academic journey, but it's really important then that you just kind of use this tool to get yourself in that mindset of what needs to happen. And we've provided that to you, and we hope that that'll be a good springboard into some of the other things that we want you to be thinking about. Secondly, we want you to be thinking about what it's like to actually be a transfer student. Again, you may not be far removed from that scenario yourself. You may have a father who started college late and then transferred. I had a brother who transferred 2 different times before he got dual degrees. So we are all somehow transfer adjacent, but we want you to be thinking about a transfer student coming to your site. What does this person think? What do they feel? What do you want them to know about your site, etc.? And so we want to start thinking about those things. And I want to show you some language. Voltaire showed you a couple of really cool things. I want to show you a few others. This is the website from our friends at Brown University. Their undergraduate admission office talks about transfers. Now, I want you to read this nice little phrase right here. Brown welcomes between 100 and 200 transfers. Already, folks are saying, wow, that's a stat. I wouldn't have thought Brown brought in that many transfer students. That's really cool. Making transfers an important and significant part of our campus community. That's very clear as to how Brown is feeling about their transfer students. And bottom line, we are happy to have you here. That language was used in some other websites too, and I love that because it's very clear in saying we want you here. You're not an accessory. We're not going to make it really hard. The other thing that I wanted to show you about this is there's some flexibility here that we really want you to encourage, and this may be outside of your purview, but it's reflected on this website. If you have applied for transfer admission, we will allow late submission of transcripts and recommendation letters. We all know that we're in the midst of a pandemic. And right now, it's very difficult for students to get those letters of recommendation, for transcripts to come through backwards and forwards when offices are minimally staffed, sometimes closed. I love that they're super clear on this website of like, look, we're going to cut you some slack because we know this isn't your fault. So when you're developing your sites, if you can think about those things that are semi-static, again, not forgotten, like we've talked about, not one and done, but those things that are regular pieces of information, and then leaving space to respond to those topical things or those timely issues that are so incredibly meaningful for transfer students. I love this a lot. The second website I wanted to introduce you to is our DePaul University website. And you'll see here under transfer student right here, again, smack dab, you can't miss it. It's right across the front. You are an integral part of our institution. No questions asked. We think about the transfer student psyche, whether they're returning learners, adult learners, whether there's somebody moving from another 4-year institution to this institution, or somebody coming from a 2-year to a 4-year. Bottom line is they want this to be the right fit. They want this to be a place where they see themselves thriving and meeting their goals. And when you have an invitation that says you are an integral part of our community, that means a tremendous amount. So these are small things that you can do, but just to be thinking about this. And this also brings up that lens of equity mindedness, not just from a racial perspective, but just from a student group perspective as well. Like, who are we inviting and who are we saying is important at our institution? Super important. Along those same lines, Emily mentioned our web guide and those areas that really talked about opportunities for transfer students. I want you to think about those too, but I'm going to draw your attention to page 30. My little screen. Quit. I need you to move. All right. Go away. There we go. All right. One more over. Okay, so this talks about writing for transfer students. And this is page 30 on the guide. And this just gives you some sort of direction on the types of language that you want to bring forward on your sites. Welcoming, demystifying. We talk about how transfer students, we want to balance that fact that they have bringing to them a collegiate experience prior to coming to your institution, but they don't know how to do things at your school. You call things differently. There may be a process that they didn't have to go through when they were at their previous institution. So let's demystify that. Create that partnership between their former school, themselves, and their new school. That whole notion of the transfer life cycle has to involve those three entities, right? Their former school, themselves, and you all as their new school or their sending school. So those three have to be in concert. And then validating, like, you're making a good choice here. We want to see you be successful. And then backing that up with enough information for them to discern if this is truly the right fit for them. You noticed on the brown page, the picture that was there, it really depicted traditionally aged students. And there's nothing wrong with that if that's what your traditional transfer student population looks like. That's fine. If by chance, though, you've got a different set of students, you've got a different approach, and you've got more older students, then you want to reflect that as well. So there are just some important ways that you can do that. Other things that you can do related to thinking about quick wins or next steps, think about what information you're providing to them from like a next steps process. Now, we don't want to spend all of your time on your website with just do this, do this, do this. You want to first bring them in and make them feel important, but then you've got to give them a roadmap. So if you only have a few things that you can do on your website, figure out what that nice transfer checklist looks like. And most importantly, start attaching contact information. Direct students specifically to a person within a department, not just a department, but giving them that person that they can talk to, that human being that can help them process their concerns, their questions, etc. So that checklist, I think, is going to be a really, really important part of that process. And then thinking too, just about whenever we talked earlier, there's so much we want to share with our transfer students. We know they need to know so much, but you've got to make sure that you're editing yourself down, presenting it in the right way, such that it's not just a bunch of gurgly gook. Like they just are finding it difficult to navigate through all of this. Just make your headings really clear. Make those click buttons really clear. Send them on a way. I love the notion of having them do action items, because you need to be able to help them progress, but it doesn't all have to fit on one page, nor should it. So those are just some things to get you thinking. And then again, for those of you who are really more sophisticated or perhaps have the green light from your institution to do a complete overhaul, I do want to refer back to the fact that Voltaire talked about the whole navigation and how important that is. Like if you want to talk about really improving your transfer students' experience, it's them being able to navigate your site really easily. And you saw some references to that during Voltaire's conversation.
That was awesome, Janet. I think we got a lot of questions that's like, hey, this is a 90-page document. This is a big undertaking, but I don't have control of my website, or I'm working with our, admissions or our marketing team, and what can I do? And I really like the idea of starting with the writing. That's something that a lot of folks can do and can control better the information and the tone and the voice that you use on your website. So fantastic. Start with your writing, get your checklist in order, get your calls to action in order, and then you can tackle big things like the navigation. Nicely done, Janet, wrapped up in a bow for everybody. That's fantastic. So we have a couple of time if my experts are willing to answer some questions live. Oh yes. Oh, Emily. All right. Let me see if I can find one for Emily.
I chose one. Can I answer?
Oh, you did? Yes.
I am
by all means.
Thank you. I am very passionate about this specific issue, and it came up a lot in the questions we received beforehand, but also someone has asked it in our QA box, and I don't know if everybody can see the QA or not, so I want to read it. But I have an example I'm so excited to share. So Elizabeth says, could you offer some good examples of transfer course equivalency databases as one essential feature of effective university websites? Elizabeth, I've got a beef with some of these transfer equivalency guides because they're so cumbersome and they take a lot of effort for the students to find and navigate and figure out, well, I took this class and put it in the system, this and that and the other. So some institutions subscribe to services that provide that and make it a lot easier for students. Obviously, I would advocate for that if your budget allows, because it is so helpful. But if you can't afford that kind of thing, I want to show you what, I'm going to go back to DePaul's website, actually. If I can find it. There it is. Okay, can everybody see DePaul's website? Okay, so the first thing I want to say is I'm on their transfer student page. I click down over here and I click this helpful link, transfer in your courses. I definitely encourage you to get in and dig around to see what they've done here, but I want to call your attention to a couple of things. The first is they've called this page transfer guides, but then it goes directly to like those college specific, major specific course lists. I think that's great, but I'm going to be very honest with everyone and say I am an advocate for calling those what they are. They are degree program maps. A transfer guide to me is more like that transfer planning guide. Let me help you plan your transfer. So use language that's very targeted and clear for your students so they don't get confused about what they're looking at. So that's one thing I want to point out. You can see that they also have a direct link to Transferology, which is the system they use by College Source. And then they've got this link right here called recommended courses. I love this section because instead of linking to all of these cumbersome catalog listings, they have pulled out individual colleges. And when you click down, they give you not 17, but a couple of little sentences and paragraphs about what students should be thinking about taking as they prepare to enter those colleges. I think this is a very good model to think about applying to your institution if you can, because it gives just the right of information and then can always link out to additional resources as needed. And that is to Janet's point exactly, words are free, but use them wisely and then link out to additional resources to give that full detailed thing. So I don't know, Elizabeth, if that exactly answers your question. More often than not, I see websites that don't do it well and they're listing like literally 60 transfer maps and degree maps, and it's overwhelming to read through. And I do this for a living. So think about your students. Their time is precious. Give it to them very specifically if you can. Link to those transferologies or degree works or whatever it is your institution uses as best you can. But check out that DePaul site for recommendations for sure.
Thank you, Emily. That was awesome. I have another question, and I think this one's probably good for Voltaire. Volt, did you see Rebecca's question about the importance of storytelling and sharing student success stories? Are there any examples of schools doing well? This is something I think that is really important, and I'm not sure we touched on that today. I know we did in the last one.
Yeah, it's a really great question. And I do think it is important because there are two types of information I think that students typically look for. The first is, how do I do all this, right? So how much is it going to cost? What is the process? How do I apply? But then they're looking for clues on the site that signal I can be successful doing this, that I will fit in there, that I am not an afterthought. And I think that most institutions don't do this very well because they tend to view transfer students as very transactional, pragmatically minded students, rather than thinking, oh, this person's coming in with, a little bit less time to learn about the institution than a four-year student. So they need more resources. Are there sites out there that do a good job? If you take a look at the University of Washington, they have these little micro profiles of students. I would say it's a section on the transfer page called Student Stories, and they've got 4 mini profiles. I think that's a really great start. But I think if you take a look at what institutions tend to do for your traditional 4-year right out of high school student, that's an even better model, because institutions spend a lot of time thinking about, all right, well, what is this audience looking for in terms of success, statistics, a sort of explanation of the individual journey that they went through. So if you can take that framework and then apply it to your transfer profiles, that is a really great recipe for good storytelling. I think a lot of times transfer sites are really good at here's what you need to do, but not really good at here's why you want to go here. Most institutions can level that up for transfer students significantly.
I think they should tell the story of Laura and her father going to school at the same time. I know I would read that story. So yeah.
Glad you find it compelling.
Yeah, go ahead, Janet.
Now, Daniela, can I switch gears and answer another question off the
Absolutely.
Q&A?
Absolutely.
Great. I want to respond to Laura's question because it has broader implications. And so Laura's asking about how do you talk about courses or pathways that perhaps are non-credit or, again, non-degree seeking without it sounding negative, like where are you going? I think it's really important that you talk about this from an exploration perspective and that you also then provide additional information so that if they are thinking maybe not today about transfer and what that could look like, but you're also providing what the pathway forward could look like to them also. You have one shot at helping these folks see an academic journey in totality. So even though they're coming to you, maybe as you saw one of those different life scenarios, maybe they find themselves in one of those life scenarios and you could talk about what they need to know and then also say, and if you're ready to come back later, then you can provide some additional kind of support around that as well. We talk about that in relation to our community college partners too, is sometimes they are only talking about transfer with those who have declared their intentions to transfer, not those who are going directly into a career. And I really balk at that because I think that everybody has the opportunity to come back into education at lots of different points in their life. And so if we can set folks up to understand that the fluidity of moving in and out of education and thinking about how to enter and re-enter institutions from a transfer perspective, regardless of what their current intentions are, I think that's really important, and our websites play an important role in that also.
Yeah, Janet, I would love to add on to that a little bit more. One thing that I've been thinking about in regards to that question is what are the goals of those students currently? They may end up transferring in the future and becoming a degree seeker, but what are they looking for now? And I love the idea that you're looking to name this persona in a way that feels positive and affirming. And some words that come up for me are like lifelong learner or knowledge seeker. And once you get them into the classroom, then, maybe from there, as Janet was saying, you can work on creating an additional pathway for them to transfer in.
Love the idea of lifelong learning. I think we should all subscribe to it. I think we have time for one more question, and I'm going to try to breeze through my resources in order to get this. But we did get several questions about buy-in and playing ball with your MarCom team. Your faculty has come up twice. So Megan has a specific question about she feels pretty good about the transfer website, but she could use some assistance in helping the academic department chairs and deans think about how to make transfer-friendly improvements. So would you all share some tips and tools in getting buy-in from admissions, from faculty, from all the campus partners we all work with?
I will throw in three things that I think of. First is understand the landscape of transfer at your institution. And Janet covered this in our first webinar, which is, how is transfer trending? I think a lot of people don't understand the sheer financial impact of transfer, and more institutions are realizing that we need to focus on this really key audience. So number one, understanding the landscape. Number two, I would say, is you can do quick guerrilla type usability testing. And there is nothing better for administrators, for key leadership people, for faculty members, than to see a prospective transfer student try to navigate the current site. Chances are you get a couple of these recorded and you play these usability sessions back for these audiences, and the light will go on. And they'll say, oh, wow, I didn't realize how hard this was. There's nothing better, I find, than those recorded usability studies to get people to understand how bad a problem is. And then the third thing I would say is take a look at your analytics, because your analytics, like you pointed out, Daniela, can indicate where there's a problem. So if you can take those three things and then come to the different stakeholders and say, all right, let's collectively align on the issues that we have and on the goals that we have for transfer students, then you can start to build that alignment.
Emily, do you have anything else on that? Because I've got something too. I know you might have something to add there.
I would just echo, use your data. You know, odds are you've got one major or one college that is pulling in the majority or a big percentage of your transfer students. So start there, or start with your departments where you've got a transfer ally where they get it and they are used to supporting their students. Do some tweaks and tests on their website, make that one better, and then use that as an example to bring other people on board. Megan, I also want to let you know, I don't know if you're on our listserv, Megan, but we are going to have a new resource sometime in the spring, maybe late spring. I'm working with a couple of faculty researchers right now to create a resource targeted towards university faculty to say, this is why you need to understand your transfer students, and here are some things you can do. So it's not website specific, but it is about empathizing and understanding with that population and why they are so critically important. So keep an eye out for that next spring. You may recognize names like Julie Wong and Peter Felton and John Iannuzzi from Achieving the Dream. So those are some of the commentators who will be working on that with me. So keep an eye out for that. And then data, though, is my biggest one. Janet, what do you think?
Yeah, I think partnership, and this is a good opportunity for you, Megan, as a transfer center director, to really work with whomever it is that oversees different departmental or college level websites. So when you've got a team that may have decentralized responsibilities for your website, really deciding how you can then work your magic through those web developers, and then bring on the deans and the academicians and the faculties in relation to their department, but use both sides. Get them from, like Emily said, the data and helping them to understand the importance of transfers, and then from the user developer side, thinking about how they can improve their transfer websites or infuse their current college websites with that transfer information. And you know, you've got a great website in your areas, then be that example that Emily's talking about.
Yeah, and those navigation gateways are important, because how hard is it on your departmental website to put welcome transfers, click here? I mean, it's not that hard, and we're not asking them to create a bazillion new resources. Odds are the stuff already exists. So help them understand we're just going to build a little gateway and then address transfer students' top concerns for that major. Like, think about it, if you're a STEM student coming in, you're going to need to know some specific things, or you're going to need to know some specific nursing things or business or accounting things. So it probably won't take as much work for them to develop those pages as they think it might. So help them understand sort of those top priorities to tackle first.
Love those. Those are excellent tips. And I just want to thank everybody. We were running a little bit long, so thank you to everybody who hung on the line and were able to hear those tips. We really appreciate it. I know our team is going to, they already are chatting out some links. If you haven't already downloaded the guide, please do so. And there's a link in there. Also, mStoner, I think Laura asked a question about how do we get started with experience mapping or personas or journeys. mStoner would love to have that conversation with you. So there's a link there to get in touch with us. And then we would love for you all, I know NISTS would love for you all to join them at their annual conference in February. It's the transfer conference. It's going to be virtual this year, February 23rd through 25th. So there's a link to that as well. And don't forget to fill out your survey. I'll tell you guys, this has been great. I'm going to miss seeing all of our faces talking about transfer students because we did this for the last few months. So thank you all for joining me, for answering questions, for taking the time, and thanks everybody for joining us today.
Absolutely. And if one of y'all uses the guides and totally transforms your site, we want to know. Tell us. We want to see what awesome work you're doing. Thanks so much for joining us and downloading that resource.
Awesome. Take care, everyone. Bye.
Take care.
Bye.